Good afternoon, thank you. That was really impressive. Thank you. We're going to kick off slightly early as we've got obviously a full room and I'm sure you've all got plans for later on in the evening. So firstly, thank you for joining us this afternoon. This is the third partnership event that Frontier has sponsored alongside Defra, and one of the reasons that we believe it's so important that we do provide our support for this event is that we understand that Defra, the team at Defra, working on the solutions for support for UK agriculture, can't do this in isolation. This has to be a collaborative exercise, and part of the responsibility that we at Frontier take very seriously is the part that we can play in providing real feedback and pragmatic and practical suggestions and proposals as Defra has historically been developing new policy support and schemes. We bring it to life in terms of the feedback from our farmer customers. So we have over 10,000 farmer customers across the United Kingdom, and we recognise that unless we act as a bit of a bridge in providing that feedback from what's actually happening on the ground, what's working, what's not working, then this policy ends up, or any policy ends up being a dusty document in somebody's drawer, as opposed to being what it's intended to be, a way of supporting our industry in the right areas. Now, one of the things I've enjoyed over the last 3 years when we've been supporting this event is that the tone of this event has always been incredibly constructive. And so I encourage you all to adopt that mindset, constructive collaboration this afternoon. I know we're all desperate for more information. We've talked a lot or heard a lot today and yesterday already about the need for clarity, transparency in terms of policy development, longevity in that policy framework. And I know from the conversations that we've already had with the Defra team that those principles are very much front of mind. But the policy development, the new SFI schemes are very much still work in progress. And so the point of this exercise, as well as sharing information, is really to hear from everyone here in this room, your thoughts, your views on what you've heard so far, perhaps some of your priorities, some of your experiences is with different SFI schemes to date. So as I say, may I ask you all to be constructively collaborative in your questions. There's going to be plenty of time for Q&A, so we're keen that this is as much a discussion event as a presentation. But I am going to hand over in a moment to Ciaran, who's going to provide some initial information and introduce other members of his team. I'm also very pleased to say we've got representation from the RPA here today as well, so really providing a cross-Defra position and feedback in terms of where the policy development is. So I'm going to now hand over to Ciaran, and I hope you have a very enjoyable event. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Diana, for that introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ciaran Devlin. I'm Deputy Director for Policy Engagement and Strategy in Defra's Farming and Countryside programme. I have to say it's a real pleasure to be here at OFC today, meeting so many of you in person, exchanging ideas about the future of farming. And sessions like this, hosted by Frontier, are of huge value to us in Defra as we take forward the policy. So many thanks for hosting the session. What I want to do in this little slot is just quickly recap some of the main themes and announcements that the Secretary of State, Emma Reynolds, set out this morning. She covered a lot of grounds in a short space of time, so I wanted to just do a little bit of recap and add some additional context where I can. Before I start, I would say that we put a couple of blog posts up on our farming blog today, and I'd encourage you to take a look later on your way home from the conference to help you digest some of the announcements that Secretary of State put forward. I am looking forward to the Q&A session afterwards. We've got various colleagues planted in the audience from across Defra Group, and as Diana said, I'd like that to be as informal a discussion so we can be sort of frank with each other, but we can also help to answer as many questions as we can. So just before I begin, Secretary of State had 3 core messages in her speech. She talked about the importance that she's placing on partnership working. She really is placing a lot of stock on government working in partnership with the industry to solve problems together and collectively. She spoke about clarity and stability, recognising that farming businesses need clarity and stability in the near term and also in the medium to long term. And she also talked about some of the things that this government is doing, not just Defra, but across the government, to put some of the foundations in place to support about how they're backing the farming industry to grow with confidence and resilience. So I'm just going to recap a little bit on some of that. Firstly, I think the speech covered two direct ways in which the Secretary of State wants to develop the partnership that she's talked about. I think she has in mind partnership between government and the farming sector, with farmers involved in shaping policy and delivery. But I think she also is thinking about partnership between farmers themselves and with industry experts, and sharing knowledge, experience and solutions that work on the ground, and any role government might have in making sure that kind of partnership can thrive. So the first example of partnership that she gave was the partnership that the government struck up with Baroness Batters. We published her farming profitability review just before Christmas, which is all about actions that can be taken to help support long-term profitability of farming business. I hope you've seen the report alongside the initial government response. I won't go into much detail about what that contains. You can have a look. I think the government has indicated a few of the initial ideas that it already wants to take forward. We're weighing up the 57 recommendations. There's an awful lot of detail in there that we want to take time to consider, and we'll be working on a full response alongside the farming roadmap. However, one of the initial steps that ministers are taking forward is the creation of a Farming and Food Partnership Board. So the board is going to be built on partnership, bringing together representatives from government, farming, food, retail and finance in order to work together on shared challenges and opportunities. The role of this board is going to be to champion sustainable productivity and food security and profitability right across the food system, with a focus on practical action to make the food supply chain work better across the board, and quite importantly, to make sure that the right voices are around the table as government is forming its policy. In terms of next steps, the approach to board membership is still being developed. Defra will be sharing details on membership and how to engage with the board in due course. However, the Secretary of State did say that initial work will focus on specific agricultural sectors, including sector plans for first horticulture and then poultry. Sorry, I think I've gone on 2 slides at once. Right. The next example of partnership, my pages are in a slightly different order, is the extension of farming and protected landscapes. The Secretary of State confirmed that she is extending that scheme for another 3 years, with 30 million of funding for that scheme available for the next financial year, so that's from April. This programme is a very popular and effective example of partnership working. It allows us to deliver national level objectives, but in a local way, as individual protected landscape areas are able to adapt the scheme and take forward the grant funding in a way that fits with local needs and objectives. The programme has partnership at its core, bringing farmers, protected landscape organisations and communities together to deliver change at scale. It's also quite flexible, meaning that farmers and land managers can work with FIPL officers to design bespoke projects. If you want a bit more information on FIPL, there was a blog post quite recently that sets out a bit of a sort of history of what FIPL's delivered over the last 4 years and some examples of how we've used that scheme and what we've delivered with it. Right, I need to go back to my page. Farmer Collaboration Fund. I think this is my final example of partnership working that the Secretary of State committed to today. She announced 30 million of investment over the next 3 years in a new approach to farm collaboration and advice. I think this has been a while in the gestation, but it also builds on and is quite consistent with some of the issues that Baroness Batters was talking about in her farm profitability review. And this is about building on what's worked well through previous programmes in the advice and guidance space, including the Farming Resilience Fund, which really showed to us the value of trusted advice and peer support. So starting this year, we'll be trialling a few different approaches in different areas. It's not going to be a one-size-fits-all kind of scheme. We'll be supporting practical learning opportunities, including farm visits, access to expert speakers, and just facilitating stronger connections with innovators and leaders, both at a local and a kind of cross-sectoral level. So, moving on then to the announcements that sort of fit around the theme of clarity and stability. I think Secretary of State really acknowledged the premium that she's placing personally on providing as much clarity and stability through the delivery of the farming schemes, as she understands the vital role that that plays for farm businesses. And I think she's acknowledged that there are certainly some opportunities for us in Defra to improve how we do that. We've had schemes closing without much notice, and we haven't always, in recent years, been able to provide enough clarity around budget windows and stuff to allow farmers to plan around scheme windows. So that's why we're focused on bringing greater near-term stability through clear budgets and timelines, and a more consistent approach to scheme changes, as well as working on the 25-year long-term farming roadmap that will hopefully give the sector confidence to plan for the medium to long term. So first on farming roadmap, this is going to set out how government will work alongside farmers to support a profitable farming sector and rural growth. We've already been working collaboratively with representatives of the farming sector over the last few months. We've had workshops in November, December, and ongoing into January. Those are sector-specific and regional to start gathering views about what needs to be in the farming roadmap, what issues we need to address, and how we can make that an enduring product. It's going to set out how farming needs to evolve in response to changing markets, technologies, and environmental pressures. But I think really importantly, it's going to help interpret the different land-based strategies that Defra has been working on over the last couple of years. For example, the refreshed environmental improvement plan that was brought out at the end of last year, but also the land use framework, which is coming out this year. So we'll build on all of those land-based strategies to try and interpret them in the farming roadmap, so the farmers can look at that and try and to understand the medium and long-term direction in terms of how government is shaping the sector. Now, on the sustainable farming incentive, Secretary of State made some really important announcements here, particularly about the timing and the approach to relaunching the SFI later this year. When it reopens in June, it's going to be revolution, not evolution, as Secretary of State said a few months ago. Sorry, evolution, not revolution, that's the wrong way around. So it's going to build on what's worked in the previous iterations of the scheme, but there are some things that we can address. It's going to be a little bit simpler, which will hopefully work better for farms and also be a little easier for our delivery bodies to administer. There's going to be an initial window starting in June, which supports access for smaller farms and for those who don't have an existing agreement. So that's smaller farms and farms who don't already have an existing environmental land management agreement. And then there'll be a second window that follows on from that, launching in September, which will be open to all eligible farms. So we're focusing on streamlining actions to reduce complexity, with a focus on a basket of actions that really achieve our environmental aims. But there will still be plenty of choice available for farmers but it will simplify things for both farmers and for delivery. The budget will be managed in a more transparent way, reflecting some of the lessons learned from recent rounds of the scheme, but also providing more stability and confidence to farmers to plan. So some of the extra things that Secretary of State mentioned are things like an agreement value cap to help us ensure that the funding can be shared widely and fairly across as many farms as possible, in a way that also is consistent with our environmental objectives to see environmental change as widely across the landscape as possible, rather than small groups of farmers doing lots. So the aim is to ensure that as many farmers as possible can benefit from the funding. Secretary of State also said that her aim is that the version of the SFI that we implement later this year would then be a stable version of the scheme that can operate for the remainder of this Parliament. So we'll be bringing out full scheme details in advance of applications opening in June, so that potential applicants have the time to understand the offer. One of the blog posts that I mentioned is focused on the SFI, so if you're particularly interested in the SFI, do go and have a look at those blog posts. Right, my final section is on the third theme on growth, confidence and resilience. So I think Secretary of State gave a couple of examples in her speech of some of the wider things this government is doing, which I think will in the long term, make a difference to growth in the sector. Specifically, some of the work around planning reforms and some of the latest changes in terms of trade deals. Let me just recap those very briefly. The government launched a consultation on changes to the National Planning Policy Framework in December, which is focused on delivering planning around key on-farm infrastructure such as on-farm reservoirs, greenhouses, polytunnels and farm shops. Again, this is one of the themes that came out of the Farming Profitability Review, and we understand just how important it is to be able to secure planning so that farmers can invest in their businesses and develop and grow the business. And I think there was going to be a very brief slide on trade deals, but all I wanted to say is that the government has set out how it's protecting standards in trade deals. Secretary of State mentioned red lines, but also through new trade deals opening up export markets, thinking about deals with US, Korea and India. And Minister Eagle referenced as one of her top priorities for this year, securing the revised and enhanced SPS agreement with the EU. The last thing that Secretary of State announced today was a sort of partnership with Dr. Hilary Cottam, who's at the back of the room. Very pleased to have her here. I'm not going to say much more about this because I'm going to hand over to my colleague, Nev Cavendish, who's leading on that work within Defra and is going to say a little bit more about it. And then we'll move into the Q&A. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Ciaran. Hi, everyone. Afternoon. As Ciaran says, my name's Neville Cavendish. I work as part of the Defra team. I've been in Defra for 5 years, and I head up our, essentially what's a research and development team. So we do a lot of early work to kick the tyres on some policy ideas, test what might work, and mostly go out to see what people in farming communities want from Defra and wider government and our services. So we try and help get some really early input to the work that we do and the types of things that you've heard announced today. What I want to do is talk through a bit more, build out a little bit on what the Secretary of State announced today around our partnership with uplands communities, starting with Dartmoor and then moving into Cumbria. We've been working with Dr. Hilary Cottam, who's here at the back. Hi, Hilary. I feel like I've got my teacher checking my homework. I'm flanked. Yeah, so what I want to do is just talk a little bit through, talk a little bit more about what we mean by thriving uplands, what we've heard that means for people, but also just talk a little bit about the process we've been through over the last year, because Hilary and I have been sort of trotting around the country with sort of wider Defra team and other people for just over a year now, and we've been to 6 different areas, and I just thought it'd be helpful to just talk a little bit about what we've heard, what we did, and then what we might do next. So if everyone can bear with me on that, I'll take you through. So first of all, Hilary was asked to do a review of uplands. And there was a lot of, I think it's probably safe to say, there's probably a lot of sighing, tutting, raising of eyebrows because people didn't want another review. And Hilary didn't want to do just another review, and neither did we, because that's not how our team works. We said we'd do a review, but do it a bit different. So we thought, well, actually, what's the problem statement, and what's the thing we want to really understand and get under the skin of, and what's important to people? So we've said, we came up with, we spoke to people sort of across the farming community, across Defra, and we came up with a problem saying, what does a flourishing uplands look like? So what's a thriving uplands, and what does it mean for sort of people, place, and communities, and the living systems in the uplands? So that was sort of our baseline question, really, to start this. So we did a lot of the sort of the desk work and sort of our real homework genuinely beforehand, before sort of going out and talking to people. So looking at the previous reviews that were done by Natural England, things like the first review on Dartmoor, and so look, we did a lot of the desk research, but then we just went out with an open mind and started conversations with people based around that question, and that really worked. And the 3 things we wanted to do really was broaden the conversation on uplands, see what people think about the future, to help build into things like the Farming Systems Roadmap. We wanted to look at what common themes and differences there were, there's slight nuances between different upland areas, what matters in Dartmoor might not matter in North York Moors, or might not matter different in the Yorkshire Dales. And we wanted to see what ideas and opportunities people had in the community. So what would they do differently? What is it that really sort of matters to them? And ultimately, we're just looking to understand how uplands communities work. This was about more than what Defra's doing and more than Defra's schemes. Actually, one of the things, we kind of had a virtual red card, if you like. If anybody talked about schemes when we were in sessions with them. There's a big red buzzer out like you get on X Factor or something, because we wanted to talk about everything else, because there's so much work happening on near-term schemes, and we've got so many people looking at how we are going to shape SFI and countryside stewardship and other schemes. We wanted to look beyond that and say, well, what else could we be doing, and how do other things connect that are important to you to have a thriving community and a thriving business and a thriving place. We took a systems approach, and it was really important for us to do that, and it's quite. I think it's really important as well to just note that this is really quite, I think, a landmark for Defra in terms of the way it's approaching this work. As I say, Hilary came in and said we wanted to do this review differently, and we wanted to take a systems approach to this, because you can't just fix one part, look at one part of the system and not look at the sort of the contributing factors and dependencies. So, we wanted to look at something that addressed people, nature and place, as I've sort of already said around the sort of problem statement. But actually we want to say, if you look across the whole system, what are the things in terms of services, the things in terms of community, what are the things in terms of businesses, or local businesses and so on. So we did, that picture there, is and we've got many different looks when we sort of get this what's essentially a game board out and some playing cards. We sort of had 72 cards, different things on them, and they represented the system. So each of those cards, which you can't see here, we did sessions with people in the evenings. We were sort of going to pubs, going to cafes, going to farms, going to community area centres, village halls, and just meeting with people, not just farmers. We're meeting teachers, shopkeepers, other people from the community, to sort of look across all of those cards and sort of say what's important to them. So you can see there, sort of we've put things down as sort of sectioned into infrastructure, community, culture, landscape and nature, and the economy, and all those cards. There was things on those like food systems or access to services, access to schools, local food production, services, hospitals, everything that would represent the things that form a community, and we would and that was our representation of the system, so we could understand, and sort of we got people to place things on that map to understand what was important to them. And it was really interesting seeing the conversation with people, where sort of, there were sort of people trading off one thing versus the other, and sort of and discussing what is actually really important for them in their community. And it was really important to have those different voices in the room as well, because if we did this with just a group of farmers or just a group of teachers, you'd have a very different outcome. But the whole point of this and looking across the system is saying, actually, how do you balance that, and how do you look horizontally across all of this? So it's really interesting doing that, and it's really important. I think, like I say, it's quite novel for Defra to really be committed to doing this, and we're really pleased that we've had a chance to do it. So we went to 6 different upland areas. We did, as I said, we did farmer network and community conversations. We did workshops such as the ones I sort of showed you there. We did a lot of visits, a lot of walks, a lot of farm visits, which was really, really good. Most of the things we learned were actually whilst we're walking farms, and not necessarily sat around the table with the cards. That was really interesting, but actually just going out and having conversations with people. Yes, we had some really wonderful lunches and meals and things as well provided by people on their farms, which was great, because you just you're in people's homes, in their environment. It was really nice to be welcomed and to have a really open and frank conversation with people, and for people to be really candid with us, actually, because that was really important. And as I said earlier, it was speaking to people from a variety of different backgrounds. So it was really really quite interesting over the year to do this. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we heard. So I'm sort of going to take this from 2 angles, and again, I'll be quite sort of candid here with what we heard, because this is part of the role of my team, is to sort of for us to hold a mirror up to ourselves actually and say, well, what is it we need to learn? What do we need to change? This is just a snapshot of things, just to give you a sample of the types of things we heard. In terms of community and services, so things about rural communities having inadequate access to services. A lot of the things we did. I'll caveat this with, a lot of the things that we did here will probably not be new to any of you in the room. They're things that you will have heard before, but actually going out and hearing this and putting it together as a complete story, and knowing that some of these issues are still things that are live and are still really important to people in communities. It's really underlined it for us as Defra, which is why we've got the commitment from ministers to do something different. Because if you don't do this, address some of these things, then we'll still be talking about this in sort of the next 3 conferences over the next few years. So, things like access to internet. We've heard so much about people paying £75 a month for Starlink because there's no rural broadband, but yet we've had a gigabit broadband strategy from other departments for some time, but it's not yet realised. But that impacts people's pockets because you're also talking to them about how their business income. Things around access to schools, childcare, mental and physical health care, huge thing. I was really interested in the thing about farmer aid that I heard from Rabbi earlier this morning at the breakfast thing. There's so much we heard about mental physical health amongst the farming community, but the lack of support in a lot of the upland areas. And also, things costing more, deep poverty in some areas. And each upland area is so different in each of those things I've mentioned. But yeah, so in terms of services, that was a real consistent theme. Things like agricultural colleges. The other thing about education we heard was people just keeping people in the area. That sort of, if someone will go off to university, go to kind of the big smoke to go to university in Manchester or something, and then they think, well, why do I want to come back to the farming community? Why they've seen something different, and it's really hard to get people to come back. But actually, also just to have the availability of agricultural colleges and what they're teaching is also very disparate. Housing, we've got a real. There's a thing that housing. It's really financed geared up to sort of new builds and new things, but people want to reuse and do up, and there's no support for that, and there's nothing in the system that allows for that. So again, some of the things that we've announced today with planning, and some of the other things that are happening with MHCLG will hopefully help with that. Local food systems, lack of infrastructure locally to help create that kind of that thriving local economy. There's a lack of join up and a lack of any infrastructure to do that. So there's a need to create some sort of infrastructure for that because the system feels broken, is what we're hearing. And then also, we heard about that farmers like to innovate and learn with trusted horizontal peer networks. Obviously, the collaboration initiative we heard about today, that's a great step on that, towards that. But, people want to learn in peer networks. They trust each other, and they want to work horizontally and build those trusted relationships. Defra policies, and again, just another snapshot, but it's quite again interesting to hear. Some of it hard to hear for us as Defra, but it's useful for people to be so honest. But there was a thing about people feeling that there's a sort of parent-child relationship between Defra and the community as farmers, and there's sort of this innate fear of sort of getting something wrong. So people would say they'll wait to be told to do something by Defra, but then actually once we tell them to do something, then they worry that they'll get in trouble for doing it wrong. So there's a sort of real circular kind of thing there, and feeling of this kind of infantilization, I guess, between amongst the farming community. The science behind Defra's decisions. So the things like stocking rates. So we heard a lot sort of in urban communities about why stocking rates kind of are as they are, and sort of I remember with a guy called Will Rawlings over in Cumbria, and he's sort of pointing so sort of you got a snow-capped fell, and he's saying the stocking density up there is the same as it is down in the kind of down in the lower part of the fells. But the two things is some of the science is old, some of the science doesn't necessarily make sense to people, and it doesn't think about the rest of the system. It's kind of the science is very black and white and the facts. So that was again another consistent thing. Thing that Defra is structured to support large-scale farmers. We've heard today a bit about small farms, but there's the feeling that it's about sort of small networks of small farms in a community. Reuse, remake and share. Current policy pushes against this. I suppose the system doesn't support things to generate and grow sort of in the local economy in the way that we fund things. So that's just a sample of some of the things we heard. insights. So I want to move on a little bit now, just to touch a little bit on some of the insights, and this is where I really get checked because these are sort of Hillary's insights, which I've translated into some of my own words. But so actionable insights, not to teach you to suck eggs, but so an insight is something where we've sort of looked at an issue, a problem, or something in a common theme. We're saying actually, how can we frame that as an opportunity to do something actionable and take an action from it? So that was again part of the difference with what we did and the approach to this work. It was not necessarily to just come up with some sort of a list of recommendations and write a report on it. We said, actually, what are the insights that we've gained from this year of research, and how might we then work on those insights with people in the community to make some change and see what those insights mean in different areas for those people, and looking at all of those insights in totality. So when I go through these, there's no priority order or one that's more important than the other. This is about actually that all of these insights need to be looked at in the round together, so you've got that systems view. There's not any individual thing that's sort of more prominent than the other. First, and this is just a sample of them, we've got sort of 19, 20 of these insights that we will be sharing in a written up format to everybody soon. But so the thing about vibrant systems need experience and new entrants. We've heard a lot about new entrants, and we're still doing we want to do some more research with new entrants, really, to understand how some of the challenges they face coming into upland farming areas. I mean, there's a lot of commonalities from research we've done before around what support new entrants need, and we've done some work with this previously in Defra with our new entrants scheme. But we know that it's really challenging for new entrants in uplands areas, but the system needs new entrants to come through the system. I've mentioned this one already, but farmers innovate and learn with trusted horizontal networks. But there's these sort of vertical relationships with government and different agencies, different bodies. So we sort of operate like this, but farmers and the communities operate like this. So we need to kind of work out how you can change that, how you can sort of work on a more horizontal basis. Food systems being the heart of thriving economies. As I say, the infrastructure is absent there. There's really some work to be done. We've heard a lot as we've been around areas around lack of local food systems and people, we were hearing today actually in another session about sort of things like market gardens and things like that, and actually sort of keeping food in a local area and what that can actually do for a local economy. So there's a lot to be done on the food system space. And then just another theme on governance and services. So commons is something that's come up quite a lot and quite often. Commons governance, we've seen lots of different things. In Exmoor, they've got some really good examples of how they can govern and manage in commons. In other areas, there's some real challenges. And there's not really any examples of people being able to see any best practice or understand where else there are examples of good commons management. So just in terms of just knowledge sharing, where actually there is, I don't know how many people know about the way Exmoor structured in terms of the commons governance, but we felt that was a really good example there and something to learn from. But actually, there's other examples internationally that work really well as well in terms of commons governance. And then just that point again on services, I won't go over that one because I started with that one when I was talking about sort of some of the things we found. But that's just an example. There's sort of 4 or 5 things there out of, like I say, about 20 themes insights that we've come up with. But we're hoping that those are the things that will help shape the work. And when we say we want to work, when the Secretary of State announced today that we'll work with Dartmoor and then with Cumbria, what we want to do is say now we've got these insights, we want to then work now with people in those areas to say, what do we do? How do we work with you on these? And what would you like to get from us in supporting you with them? And I think it's just about rethinking the system. So, people can manage resource locally. They don't necessarily need the top-down governance that we provide, that the system kind of currently operates in. And looking at resources, there's a lot of resource that goes into an area, sort of money, people, whatever, and there's a lot of overlaps. People don't necessarily know what money's available to them, or how money flows, or or what people personally get from sort of some of the resource that goes to an area. So I think there's something around looking at how you can redistribute and look at resources and flows of resources and social benefits with some of those resources. And then also, local people understand what's needed locally. They know the geography, they know the community, they know the businesses. So they're the best people that are really placed to design the future and work with us on this. So what next? We don't know what next really, because apart from saying we're working with Dartmoor and Cumbria, the whole point of this is that, you know, we now need to take these insights out, as I say, and see what we will do next with this. But the idea is just to give people a sense on timelines, because we'll be we're going to Dartmoor next week. Hilary and I are going out to see some people in Dartmoor to talk about how we might start working with them from the spring. And then we'll also be having conversations in Cumbria, similar ones, to hopefully start something with people in Cumbria in the autumn. But we need to work out, you know, Cumbria is huge, so we need to work out, you know, what is the geography? Do we work on water catchments? Do we work on landscape recovery areas? Similar in Dartmoor, you know, do we do the whole of the national park? Do we do 1 or 2 landscape recovery areas? How do we operate in that? So we need to work with our own Defra group partners and our sort of delivery partners, and also work with people in those communities who've got the expertise locally to work out what is the best geography, what's the local leadership, what partnerships are already in place, and how do some of our other existing schemes and services fit into that. But that's us in the uplands, so hopefully you found that useful. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Neville and Ciaran. So, good afternoon. I'm Richard Barnes, Head of Technical Services at Frontier, and I have the pleasure of summarising the elements covered during this session and then to open the floor to the questions you all have. Thank you, Diana, for your opening words, and to Ciaran and Nev for your excellent presentations. Ciaran, you've eloquently helped us all take stock of what the Secretary of State shared with us this morning around the future of farm strategy delivery. A most welcome and much needed recap. Thank you. Nev and Hilary. Where are you, Hilary? Hello, Hilary. We get to know you well, Hilary. Thank you. It's fantastic and refreshing, an equal measure, to hear and see the much needed focus on upland farms, the communities and their landscape. The diverse community engagement is refreshing and heartening to see, and no doubt, particularly to the end of that presentation, some of the learnings will be transferable to the lowland landscape too. Particularly the parent-child perspective, that was particularly interesting. And the fear of getting things wrong applies to many of us in this room, regardless of the farm location, size or system. So hopefully much of that will be transferred to other work. So we've all had much to digest from today's updates, from Baroness Batters, for those of you in this room at 8 a.m. this morning, and that from the Secretary of State, Emma Reynolds' session in conference with the key headlines. Certainly, for me at least, being: we all need to focus on partnership, to work together, not against each other. Cross-industry collaboration is critical. Let's connect our experts. A clear need and desire for some long overdue clarity and stability. I think we can all get right behind that. No more unexpected scheme closures. Please. Profitable farming and healthy farmed environments need to be hand in hand, working together. We can't have one without the other. We'll hopefully see a simpler, fairer and more stable sustaining farming incentive coming forward. And a focus on precision farming, data management to drive efficiency and optimise resources. So, with partnership, clarity and stability all up there, this will help to grow confidence for growers, land managers and the rest of us in the industry, supporting you all with advice and support and products and expertise. From a firm footing, farmers can make plans, engage with new initiatives, adopt new technology and develop their own innovation. This will in turn build resilience in the face of other external challenges such as weather and commodity prices that we can't immediately influence. So hopefully that's a reasonable recap of this session and some of the things we've heard through this morning's sessions. Now to move to the Q&A with Ciaran and Nev. We're all very keen to develop an open, flowing dialogue to get the best from the remaining time. Please, please, please ensure your questions are succinct and to the point for everybody's benefit. We've got around 25 minutes if we need it, so we have time, but please let's give everybody a chance to speak. I will moderate and ensure we get a good spread of questions to our panel. Alongside Ciaran and Nev, we have some of their colleagues from Defra, RPA and Natural England, which is great to see a collective support. So you both have some friends to phone if you need some help. I'm sure you won't. So I'll now open the floor to questions. Fire away. Andrew.
Repeat the last part of it.
Who do I talk to about starting a farmer cluster? So cooperation around 25 farms together in Northamptonshire.
Is that on? Can you hear me? Yeah, that's very loud. I think the kind of activity you're talking about there is exactly the kind of activity that we'd be wanting to support through the Farm Collaboration Fund that we'll be taking forward in due course. That's exactly the sort of collaboration that fund is there to support, so farmers can get together locally and collaborate. So it's watch out for more details of that fund, and that will be the route for that.
Yes, madam.
I think this sort of builds on that question. It's about the change in SFI. So I guess SFI was originally sort of open to all, expected to remain open to all, but with the caps and sort of priorities on small farm, etc., how do you ensure that all land that can provide environmental benefit is included in SFI or other schemes?
Yeah, so just, I guess it's really important just to reiterate that SFI is not changing to be a scheme for small farms. All the Secretary of State has said today is that the first window this year will have priority access for farmers who don't currently have an SFI agreement and for small farms, whether they do or don't have a current agreement. And that's just about, in that early window, giving a little bit of access, particularly to small farms, to try and shift what ministers have seen as the distribution in the scheme, where quite a lot of the funding in the earlier rounds of SFI has gone towards the larger funds. It's just a sort of slight correction of the balance, if you like. But it's not that SFI is being sort of changed in any permanent way towards small farms, if you like.
And
The cap is about ensuring a relatively even distribution of activity across farmland. We have actually in our refreshed EIP, if you have a look at it, there's a new interim target there about doubling the number of farm businesses who are providing sufficient resources year-round for wildlife. That means that we, in sort of designing our schemes, we have to make sure that we're going to hit that cap. We have a statutory duty to do that. And so we need to make sure that the SFI funding is being spread sort of broadly and evenly and not being sort of taken up sort of by a small number of farms. That's partly what today's announcements are driving at.
Thank you. Jim.
Just to build on that one about cap, please, if I can, Ciaran, and one about timing windows. Please don't overlook that some of these big farms with a lot of land. We listened to the Breckland's presentation this morning with the RSPB talk about landscape. If you take the large farms out of the Breckland's recovery project, you take the project out. Surely the cap should be based on a value delivered per hectare against the percentages required. It's really, really important that you don't skew it the other way really quickly, unintentionally, in my view. And I really think that's a very important thing to do.
Well, absolutely. And I should say that we will be working with stakeholders over the next weeks and months to fine-tune some of the detail. We haven't set out the scheme detail today. So these things are the kind of issues that we'll be discussing, about what kind of level such a cap would be at and what the considerations would be. I don't know, Jonathan, if there's anything you want to add to that, or if that's... Sorry, this is Jonathan Marsden, who works on SFI content.
Yeah, thanks, Jim, and thanks, Ciaran. As Ciaran says, there's an awful lot of work to do in terms of refining what the level of the cap will be. We've got some initial thoughts, and that's what we're going to work with stakeholders over. I think another key point is the cap at the moment, where we're thinking about this is in terms of SFI, and it's ensuring that, as Ciaran has said, a larger number of farmers can take part in the scheme. And that's probably all I want to add at this stage.
Out at the back.
There are a multitude of reasons why small farms haven't previously maybe been the first to access these schemes, and why bigger farms are sometimes better resourced or just have more land availability to be able to access SFI options. It worries me slightly that there's this attitude that you're going to open the door and immediately there's going to be this influx of small farms being able to, and the issue around what small farms mean is obviously a problem. But what else is Defra going to do to ensure that those farmers that would like to but maybe don't feel the confidence or have the resource to access these opportunities are going to get to? Because partly accessing SFI and the collaboration projects are very much tied together, and if you don't have one, farmers won't access the support that they need to.
I'll just give a brief response, which is those are the kind of issues that we do want to tackle, and that is exactly the kind of issue that we would hope to improve through the Farmer Collaboration Fund. We realise that there are a range of barriers that prevent some farmers from signing up to schemes. Those can be very complex, and the Collaboration Fund should support some farmers to come and apply. So I think I just agree with you. I'm going to pass over to Mike, who wants to add something on that. Mike is the Programme Director for Farming.
Thanks, Ciaran. Thanks for the question, and great to see some familiar faces. So I'm Mike Rowe, Director of the Farming and Countryside Programme in Defra. So one of the other things we're thinking about doing, and it's maybe softer and off-system, is how can we sort of show to certain small farmers in various sectors what their peers who have been able to get into the schemes have chosen in terms of some of the options. Secretary of State also talks about wanting to streamline a number of options so that we don't have this bewildering array of paperwork for everyone to work through. And I think if we can use our partners such as the NFU and Natural England and RPA to help broadcast to certain farms in certain sectors, look, your peers in this sector or in this region, these are the things that they've chosen, it might just sort of direct people to the options that might work best for them. So it's a combination of soft and sort of more system measures.
Thank you. I'm nearly feeling like Fiona Bruce in question time, not as glamorous. There's lots of questions coming, so lady at the back, on there, thank you, and gentleman at the front next, thank you.
It's probably been answered in the previous question, but I know a really high percentage of SFI technical applications were submitted by land agents, and obviously small farms often don't have access to that sort of support. So my question is also going to be what support will be available in a timely enough manner that people can prepare for the due application window and make sure they can take advantage of the funding in time.
That is a good question. I may pass over to Jonathan to see if he has anything to add, but what I would say is we've already started the discussion with stakeholders. It's been going on, but over the last few months, but also today, even at this conference, we've been speaking to stakeholders and talking about what they might do when we launch the small farms window to really work with people who are eligible for that window to support them to get their application because I think we recognise the same issue. Ministers are aware of that, and that's part of the reason for structuring the windows in the way that they have. Jonathan, is that it, or anything you would like to add?
Just one thing. We're not in a position where we've no small farms in the scheme. There are an awful lot of small farmers in the scheme at the moment, just not as many as there are big farmers. So if we think about large farms, and you can define this in many different ways, we're probably at 85–90% of the big businesses have got some sort of an agreement with us at the moment. And that can drop down, and it's pretty much a straight line. As farms get smaller, the level of participation drops. And that gets steeper the smaller the farms come. So it's relatively, and then it drops off. So what can we learn from those small farms that are in? How did they access a scheme? Did they use an agent, or did they just find the time to sit down and go through this? And as Mike said, maybe we can short-circuit some of that if we know there are people in a particular area or particular farm size that are using particular actions. Let's just shortcut that and signpost people to those particular actions. And if that chimes with them, we're trying, and some of the simplification work we're doing is helping us to work with RPA to make it an even quicker, simpler application process. So maybe if they haven't got access to an agent, maybe they don't need access to an agent.
Excellent, thank you, Jonathan. I'm conscious Neville's been in the spotlight, so if anybody's got any upland questions, Nev is desperate. It's like a coiled spring ready to answer them, so please give it some thought if there are any upland questions or more learnings from the upland work, because there's very much some transferable piece.
The upland I'm talking about is in the Yorkshire Dales. The only local abattoir closed 18 months ago, and that's exactly the sort of scheme that I would encourage you to support, because by supporting that, the animals are kept in the Dales, they're killed locally, they're eaten locally, it's a very circular thing. So can that one actually be put forward, please?
Hello. That's actually that's something we heard a lot about actually. Sort of abattoirs, use of things like mobile abattoirs. So that's something that we've heard across all the areas. There was an example actually in Exmoor where somebody they got sort of 200 cattle and they didn't want to send them for the distance they had to send them to then come back to then sort of be come back locally to go into the food system. But yeah, abattoirs and access to abattoirs is something that has come out. So we definitely noted.
Thank you, Andrew. Come to you, sir, and then Vicky at the back in a moment. Thank you. We can pass that mic.
John Galdard, Cumbria. Can I first of all just endorse the comments the gentleman at the back has just made about the local abattoirs? I was chairman of AIMS for 3 years, looking after the small, medium-sized abattoirs, and we're fortunate in Cumbria that we have two local abattoirs, but it's an absolutely essential point, which is vital, and don't anybody dream about a mobile abattoir as the answer to the problems, because it really isn't, So basically, chairman of the Leinster Farmers Group, 48 farmers and a golf club. Jonathan visited along with Tamara Finkelstein. Tamara, thought absolutely wonderful everything we were doing, but unfortunately retired after that. But basically, the real question is, how quick are you going to move? Because everything you've talked about today, there's been a lot of positive stuff. I've been coming here, I've only missed 3 times in over 30 years. And I've taken a lot back from Oxford over the years, always taken something back. And it's absolutely vital. And I can tell you now, some of the conversations of 20 and 30 years ago were far more dismal than what things are at the moment. There is opportunity and challenge at the moment, and it's a case of grasping it. But you guys have got to move at some pace. There is these groups out there. We need these groups out there. Defra have recognised the need for these farmer groups. For you to get the right information, you need to get right to the heart of the farmers. The 1947 Act in the 50s and 60s was set up by government engaging MAF with farmers on the ground and getting the real information to make sure the country never starved again. Fantastic success. Okay. That's the sort of thing you need to do. So these groups are out there. I'm waiting for you. We're working on a voluntary basis. You need to get up to Cumbria. We can show you. Our group has dredged the first river in 20, 30 years, successfully, legally. And there's young gentlemen there working on farms that can't believe they've never seen the land draining so well because the river's actually been drained. That's been a massive challenge. 3-year project of discussion, a 14-day action with Network Rail and everybody else engaged. Collaboration is vital. So basically, the question to you is, please, you recognise the groups are there. How quick are you going to act? Because there's a lot of people out there, the BPS payments have gone. They're not signed up to SY, they need action.
So, speed of delivery.
Well, firstly, I'll say, completely hear that, and we have, as a sort of demonstrator, we've been on the ground a lot, and we're really keen to get back out on the ground. We've been out with Ullswater CIC, Westlake and CIC. We've been out seeing exactly what people are doing and what the power of sort of farmer networks and clusters can do. And we've seen people really sort of focusing on and getting things done quickly in the areas. One of the other things we haven't covered, I didn't cover today, is there seems to be a lot of opportunity as well, and examples of where there's sort of local funding and things available as well, to support some mutual setup. perhaps, and to help do things quicker and to seed fund things. But the one thing I will say is what I've talked about and what we've been exploring is system change, and some of the things are societal, some of the things are economical. They won't, and the environmental change, they won't happen overnight. They can't happen quickly. We can start some things quickly, but the change will take time. So this is the first 2 years of a long-term system change, and we've heard a lot of positive feedback. We've had a lot of support from groups like yourselves in doing this. But the system change takes a while, and the types of things we're talking about sort of make lasting change will take time to embed in communities, to change cultures, to change an environment. But yeah, we're up for getting out there quickly. That's why we're out in Dartmoor next Tuesday. We've announced it. We're out next week. That's it. We're going. But then it's down to what we work with on the ground and who we work with on the ground to see how we can do things.
Thank you, Nev. Vicky.
Yeah, Vicky Robinson from the Agricultural Industries Confederation. It is an uplands question. Obviously, what you're looking at cuts across several different departments in government. So I'm just interested, are you having those conversations? Have they bought into what you're looking at as well? And do you then potentially envisage this being a blueprint for other areas in the country?
Yes, we have talked to other departments. We've talked to things like the Test and Learn unit in Cabinet Office, who's working across government to look at how we learn and sort of the activity we're doing in place in different areas around the country. We've talked to MHCLG and other departments. So yeah, this is going to involve education, it'll involve health and so on. But I think where we need to look first of all at Defra's landscape and the opportunity for Defra to change, and some of the things we might be able to do quickly from a Defra perspective, and then look at as we learn, as we go in local areas, then work out which other departments we need to bring in and at what stage. But yes, the short answer is yes, we have talked to other departments and they're engaged. And then your second question, sorry?
Just whether or not then this could be considered...
Sorry, yes. So one thing I didn't say actually, this isn't a pilot, it's not a test, it's not just a short-term project. This really, we hope this will be the first 2 years of change, and we're starting with Dartmoor because the conditions seem right, and there's a lot of things we've seen in Dartmoor that mean actually it's a really good space to start. But if we can unlock some things and change things in Dartmoor, so we might change something in the way that Natural England works locally in Dartmoor, or we might change the way some funding flows to the area. If we can unlock the system and change the system, then we don't need to roll it out, so to speak. It just means the system will then be open for other people to other areas to do similar things. So there's not a blueprint where we're saying we're going to go to Dartmoor and Cumbria and here. It's where we work with Dartmoor, work with Cumbria, because they'll be able to learn from each other and we can do things. But if the system changes, then people should be able to sort of come along quickly. To pick up your point, it's not wait for 2 years until we've done this. It should be hopefully 3 months' time there'll be something that other areas can benefit from, and then we sort of build the change out from there.
Excellent, thank you. I'm going to come to Jeff in a second, and then you, madam. I'm going to be really selfish here and ask a question for myself. Ciaran, I've got a number of growers I work with who are in agreements for both SFI and stewardship, which expire towards the end of this year. Where do they stand with regards to the secondary application window, and what would your advice be on how next to proceed?
Shall I pass over to Jonathan on that one?
Poor Jonathan, he's looking exhausted.
And I'm going to pass to Tom in a moment from the RPA side. We're acutely aware of that situation. We know we've got a large number of agreements that are due to expire starting this autumn, with a particular spike in December because of the old mid-tier agreements, because when we were in the EU, all the agreements had to start in January and end in December. And that does create some interesting challenges. And we're very much so first of all, we're very much aware of that, and we're thinking about that, and that is in part why we've gone down the two-window approach. In terms of the challenges that faces for delivery, Tom, are you happy just to say a few words?
Yeah, sure. Hi, folks. Tom Foster from the RPA. Yeah, so at the moment, if you're expiring, you would have to wait for your agreement to expire before it unlocks the land and you can make a new application. What we're exploring is whether we can allow people to apply before their agreement expires. So we're just working with our technical supplier to see if we can do that. But that's definitely what we're exploring. We recognise we need to avoid that cliff edge of expiries at the year end and try and give people the ability to work out what they want to do on their land and apply before their agreement expires, and smooth out some of that makes it easier for us, it will make it a lot easier for you, and a lot more certain for you as well, we hope.
Can I make a suggestion on that?
Yeah, sure.
Your tech guys can't make it work. Can you backdate those poor people a couple of months to September?
So let's answer the question on whether we can make it work or not, and then we'll open up that discussion. Yep. Happy to consider that once we've answered that first question.
Thank you. I've been fully indulged. Right, last two questions to Jeff, please.
Yeah, thanks. Some of us are old enough to remember the last big review, which was probably Don Curris in 2002, called Back and Foot Meth, which introduced a set of schemes which were implemented within a 3-year period, and they were immensely successful, they were stable. Here we are, 7 or 8 years on from GO's proclamation at this conference back in 2017, and we're still not where we need to be. So my plea is, don't feel obliged to create something new. We were looking back at 90 years, there's plenty of good things, so dig deep into your delivery bodies, harness that institutional experience which is there, and build on the successes of the past.
Shall I come in? I mean, Jeff, absolutely agree. I mean, you heard very clearly from the ministerial team today how important they see just to stabilise things and sort of slow down the pace of change, if you like, because that's the one constant over the last 5, 6, 7 years, going back to the start of the Gove reforms, is that there's been steady and constant change. And we know that if we stabilise the funding schemes, then it creates more space to talk about some of the broader issues that the Secretary of State was talking about today in terms of the overall way the supply chain works and the work that Secretary of State wants to take forward through this new industry partnership board. So there is a big prize there. Nev, do you want to answer the question in relation to the uplands work?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, just to say, so in relation to, I mean, yeah, we are digging deep, and we've got all of our delivery partners and delivery bodies involved in the work that we're doing, and so things like the leader scheme, which is something we talk. There's a lot of good feedback from things like that. So we say we need to learn from what's gone before as well. So yeah, we absolutely are.
Excellent. Thank you, Madam.
Hiya, I'm Kirsty Bailey. I'm a agri-environment advisor for Natural England. I'm also doing a Defra apprenticeship and an MSc in soil science. So my question is, a lot of my work is also on nature recovery, but how can we also integrate soil recovery into that countryside stewardship offer? Because obviously healthy soils underpin everything, food security as well as
Yeah, I'll probably pass over to Jonathan in a second, but I mean, there is a huge amount in SFI that is about restoring soil health. There's a basket of actions in SFI that are about a healthy, sustainable farming system, and then there are some actions in SFI that are about sort of providing habitat for nature. And the two things go together, but SFI is sort of at its heart about transforming farming to be more resilient and sustainable in the decades ahead. So I think they're certainly trying to do the kind of things you were talking about. If you don't think it's there, we should talk behind the scenes. Jonathan, is there anything you would add to that?
You covered it very well.
Excellent. So conscious of time, just like to bring things to a conclusion. So firstly, thank you to Ciaran and Nev. I think based on the double act with your microphones just now, you've got potential to make a fabulous new boy band. And colleagues of yours, Mike, Tom, and particularly Jonathan, who's worked very hard for his supper this afternoon. Thank you, Caroline. So thank you for your presentations and the dialogue within the Q&A. Thank you to all on the floor. It's made my job a lot easier to have so many questions coming through. So there are many people in the room today who will relish the opportunity to support Defra with the roadmap and the development of SFI. So please, please don't be strangers. We are all here to help and support and build on the relationships we've developed with you over the years. On behalf of Diana and myself, I wish to express our thanks to the directors of the Oxford Farming Conference for enabling this session to be held. We're very proud of doing this for the 3rd year in succession. And thank you to the Defra team, all of you here, for your expertise and investment in making this session so informative and open. The dialogue's been really, really much appreciated. As Diana highlighted at the start of the session, we at Frontier have a long-standing working rapport with Defra and their agencies, and we very much look forward to developing that relationship going forward. It's a great example of government and industry collaborating to best effect. So, just to wrap up, safe onward conferencing or travels as applicable. Thank you and good evening.